delicious.
ਨੀਵੀਆਂ ਤੂੰ ਕੁਝ ਚੀਰ ਪਾ ਕੇ ਰੱਖ ਲੈ ਪੱਲੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੁਖੜਾ ਲੁਕਾ ਕੇ ਰੱਖ ਲੈ ਨੀਵੀਆਂ ਤੂੰ ਕੁਝ ਚੀਰ ਪਾ ਕੇ ਰੱਖ ਲੈ ਪੱਲੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੁਖੜਾ ਲੁਕਾ ਕੇ ਰੱਖ ਲੈ ਐਵੇਂ ਕਰੀ ਨਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਪਿਆਰ ਮੁੰਡਿਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਚ ਕੇ ਰਹੀ ਨੀ ਤੂੰ ਹੁਣੇ ਹੁਣੇ ਹੋਈ ਮੁਟਿਆਰ ਮੁੰਡਿਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਚ ਕੇ ਰਹੀ ਨੀ ਤੂੰ ਹੁਣੇ ਹੁਣੇ ਹੋਈ ਮੁਟਿਆਰ ਮੁੰਡਿਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਚ ਕੇ ਰਹੀ तेरा की कसूर जन शिले नैन हो गए सिख के अदामा शेर मिले नैन हो गए तेरा की कसूर जन शिले नैन हो गए सिख के अदामा शेर मिले नैन हो गए सांभ के रखनी है जोब निपटारी सांभ के रखनी है जोब निपटारी मुड़ मुड़ के नहीं आनी है बहार मुंडिया तो बच के रही नी तू हुणे हुणे होई मुटियार मुंडिया तो बच के रही नी तू हुणे हुणे होई मुटियार मुंडिया तो बच के रही करदी जवानी तेरा रूप ढाठा मारदा पतला जरक ना हुनारा भी
Good
सहारा
morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. Starting the music. Thank you to
पतला जलक
Jay,
ना हुनारा भी
Rita,
सहारा
Star.
गोरा गोरा रंग यू तो
Been
मेरे
rocking
गाजी
it
तोर
out here.
गोरा गोरा रंग यू तो मेरे गाजी तोर नहीं तेरे जई सोनी
did.
कोई नार मुंडिया तो बच के
All right,
रही
hold on.
नी तू हुणे
Our
मुटियार मुंडिया तो
DJ
बच के
can't
रही
stop
नी तू
moving.
हुणे हुणे होई मुटियार
There we go. All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. What do we think we want to do about this echo? Janet, do you have any thoughts on killing that? Okay, so let's go to the next slide. We have so many exciting things to cover today.
I was telling you. Okay.
If a buyer says that they're gonna wait.
It's okay, just go, they'll fix it.
If a buyer says that they're gonna wait because they think interest rates are gonna come down, that's the worst advice that they can take. Because if they do wait, and we all expect rates to come down, if rates dropped 1%, an estimated 1 million additional buyers are gonna enter into the market. We're still gonna have an inventory issue. what do we think is going to happen if we have 1 million more people that are looking to purchase a home? It's going to continue to drive prices up. You're going to have to waive your inspection, appraisal, etc. So if they want to wait because they think rates are going to come down, don't. Buy now and refi later.
Awesome, thank you. Mr. Lampkin.
Yeah, so number one is the buy downs have still been a super popular option for people. If you don't understand the buy downs, you really have to like call one of us just to get a 10-minute tutorial on it, because the buy down option is really making it so much more affordable for homeowners. I mean, you could get somebody at a rate of 6%, and for the first 12 months, they're only paying at 4%. And it's an amazing program.
I know it's an hour-long class, but give everybody the 1-minute version for those that don't understand the concept.
So the concept is that, let's say somebody's buying a house for $500,000 and they're financing 400, and let's say the rate's 6%. What you do is, while the loan is in attorney review, you'd call somebody like Evan and say, hey, Evan, client would like to take advantage of a buy down program, but it has to be done in the form of a seller concession. So let's say the cost of it is $10,000, or like that's how much the client's going to save over the first 3 years. So you say, I want to get a increase the sales price to 510, get a seller concession for $10,000. That $10,000 now sits in an escrow account on the buyer's mortgage statement. So every month, let's say they're supposed to pay $3,000, and let's say the payment's really $3,500. That $500 will come out of the escrow. So the client's saving $500 a month for the first year. So it's real savings. And I've only had one selling attorney say no to it because he thought it was like a subprime mortgage. But the other thing I definitely want to talk about today, because this is super important, because it happened already 3 times this week. When you're dealing with buyers that, you know, they say, oh, the guys at Guaranteed Rate are great, but my bank's offering me a much lower rate. The banks right now are hurting. Like, you know, we had the SVB crisis, we had First Republic. So all these banks right now are doing anything they can to try to get more revenue in the door. So they're offering mortgages at about 75 basis points lower than the actual market. The problem is that when they go do their appraisals, they're coming in low. I had a house in Short Hills this week, over a $3.4 million house, it underappraised by $1 million. The appraisal was so bad, right? So these banks, I don't know how they're telling the appraisers to lowball these things, but it's a real problem, because in a lot of these, you know, high-end clients, they're waiving everything. They're like, I'm waiving the appraisal, I'm waiving the contingency, I'm waiving my mortgage. This guy's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So, you know, we actually got an appraisal done and we should get back today. But I mean, it's a real problem. So even though the client's like, oh, my bank's giving me this, you have to stress to them that they don't use local appraisers. Sure.
It was somebody up in corporate pulling the comps and doing it. So, and I said to my clients, you know, if you're guaranteed rate, then our appraiser is actually the one that's filling it out. It's not somebody sitting at a desk up there just taking it from that. I mean, do we know that?
Correct. Yeah. Some of the banks
Because
have these
that's
new.
what they're doing. They're saying they're going to have it within 24 hours. They have the appraiser go there, and somebody else is calling.
We only use local people.
And our appraisers do it. The local guys do everything. I know exactly what you're talking about. They'll have one person visit the property. Yep.
Okay, so guys, it's hard to do question stuff because they can't hear, so we'll make sure you stay and grab these guys afterwards, but they're great questions. For those of you guys that couldn't hear, we were just talking about how people had some anecdotal information about appraisal situations that's really echoing what these guys are saying. Take it away. You adding something else? I thought.
No, that's it. I mean, just be careful.
One other thing, if you have a client that needs to sell and a lot of the money's coming from their sale for their buy, somebody could purchase like a $1,140,000 property and put down as little as 5% and get a conventional mortgage. So in a scenario like that, if they have the income to support both mortgages, if they have that 5% down payment and the closing costs, and that could be a gift, buy the new home, move in, sell the home after. If the client lets us know up front, we can have guaranteed rate, retain that loan, so we'll service it. And then they can do a recast. So we buy the new home, we put our 5% down, we move in, we sell our current home. Say they have $300,000 of proceeds that ideally they would have loved to have had that at closing, put it down, borrow less for a fee of like $300. We'll recalculate the payment and then pretty much get them to where they wanted to be, but without a contingency. So
Recasting the loan.
That is,
not every place has that either.
that is great, great, great information. All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Elton, do you know that recording sometimes? So, okay. Mine says pause, okay. So guys, a lot of you probably saw this, but Fortune magazine just said that Keller Williams was one of the most innovative companies in the planet. It goes on to specify that it's both innovation and culture. There were some other real estate companies on the list, to be fair, but they were way, way, way down the list. So I know you guys are all proud to be here and we're proud to have you, and just want to make sure you know that good stuff, because as you're out there talking to other agents that you might want to be looking to get on your downline, you know, it's good for you to know that kind of stuff. Okay, so we have a lot of new agents joining us these days, so we want to welcome all of these guys. A couple of them are back. Kathleen Polito had been here years ago and moved to Florida and came back, and George Ramirez, who so many of us love, had been tackling some other opportunities and missed us too much, so he came back. Really happy to see him. Okay, so these people we're very happy to tell you, have added some people to their downlines last month. So Suzanne Emmerich, Sue Adler, Susan Devaney, Hal Benz, Michael Martinetti have all added people to their downline and are going to get their fair share of profit share. So what we want you guys to do is continue to keep this top of mind so that you could be growing yours as well. This is really exciting, and this is just an overview, and some details are going to follow. But Keller Williams has been doing a ton of research that shows anyone who has 201 people in their database will make people in their database with 36 touch smart plans turned on, which include a neighborhood nurture. They will make $100,000. It's just what their data is showed, and it goes up from there. So we are going to be announcing the details within a couple of weeks. But it's kind of a summer project. There are so many people that still don't have their smart plans turned on and their neighborhood nurtures turned on. So what we're going to do is anybody who's using their business to run their business. So like people on teams, they're running off their Rainmakers database. So that wouldn't necessarily be appropriate for them. If you're using your database to run your team and you get at least 200 people in there turned on smart plans that equal a 36 touch and neighborhood nurtures for which you need their address, we will absorb all of the expenses for you for 1 month. So what does that mean? You guys think you pay us $100 a month. You actually don't pay us $100 a month. That $100 a month pays your E&O, it goes to Keller Williams International for technology, etc. So we will pay that on your behalf for 1 month. So we will stay tuned for the details, but this is exciting, and it's going to help a lot of people who are floundering to get their database up and running. It's going to help motivate them to get performing. Exactly. What kind of business model do you have here? Yeah, so curious in the room and throw in the chat, how many people have at least 201 contacts on smart plans that include neighborhood nurtures? In the room, hands? Anybody else? All right. What about in the chat, guys? Throw it on, because I'm very happy to hear that there's tremendous opportunity here. You guys excited? Awesome. Speaking of excitement, what I'm really excited to talk about is not this next slide right now, because Marissa's birthday, which I only just found out. So happy birthday, Marissa. Super happy. In addition to that, you guys hear us talk often about our DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. We had so many people from Flower Power join into this already very vibrant committee. But what I'm really excited about, we did this last year in Montclair. Montclair's actually been doing it for a lot of years. Everybody's invited on May 24th, decorating it all up in flags from around the world. Super excited. And we're going to have a really nice lunch with everybody can bring international food. We're going to be sending around a sign up genius. You'll want to let us know what your specialty is. Kara, what do you cook, Kara? Okay, so you got a month. Me too. Kara is actually going to be in charge of bringing Irish coffee, is what she's going to bring. And so everybody throw that date in your calendar, and you really will want to come because it's fun. Just going to touch really quickly on the investment committee. Rena, do you want to do it, or you want me to just the next couple of dates? Okay. You guys, this club has been blowing up. I think we had 40-ish people last time. That we're having a special meeting today because somebody's presenting a great investment opportunity that's just being listed today on the market for $200,000. So Evan Drachman, who's in the back, he and I were talking about the Tuesday meeting at which Evan also presented, and what really struck him is we've been talking about the fact that when you guys walk in a listing presentation, most of you are simply thinking, should I list this house? What people in the investment committee are thinking about is, would I want to buy this house? Would I want to buy this house and rent it out? Might I want to buy this house and rehab it? Would I maybe want to buy this out and do short-term rentals? Okay, maybe I don't want to buy it. Would I want to have an investor buy it? If it's in good shape, maybe I suggest it to an investor who's going to generate passive income by buying and holding it. If it's in crummy shape, do I want to present it to an investor who might flip it and give me another listing when it's rented? The point is, before you even think about whether or not you want to list that house, you should be analyzing all of those other opportunities. Listing the house should be the last thing you really want to do. It's developing that mindset that is what's going on in a big way at Investment Club. So if you haven't gotten involved in that, Rena's here, she runs it, you may want to talk to her. The next slide is just context, so you can scoot forward too. The next one is April 26th. You do have to make a commitment to join that club. You have to donate $100 to our Heart Fund, because we want people that are committed to come all the time, because we're raising the learning bar. So it's not like a drop-in thing. So think about whether or not you want to take advantage of legal insider trading. You're the first one to have access to information. So we have really cool stuff. Who's talking about Flower Power and Red Day? Okay, come on up. Okay, Red Day is next. Okay.
Different flowers than that. So, hey everyone, I did wear my flowers for a Flower Power recap. I just want to thank everyone that came, and I really hope that our Montclair people kind of understand now what Flower Power is all about. We had so many people come. I think it was probably over 100 people. It was a little crowded in there. It was a little warm, but I thought it was a great place, great food. And I think everyone really enjoyed and learned a little bit more about ALC. We had people sign up for just about every committee. Like I said, investment committee, growth. There's still an opportunity. We will send around the Google spreadsheet so that you can still sign up. We always want people to volunteer. Red Day is coming up. So it is going to be an annual event for our Flower Power Happy Hour. I think it's a great way to get to know each other. And so if anyone, keep in mind a venue for next year and any other fun topics. So any questions? No, well, thanks. Wear flowers.
All right, Red Day is next.
Hello.
Hi, co-chairs of Red Day. So I'm Jean Roglin, and
I'm Bridget Robertshaw.
so if you're not familiar with Red Day, I'll take 1 minute to explain what that is. And Red Day is celebrated on the second Thursday of every May. It's to acknowledge Mo Anderson's birthday, and it's our International Day of Service. So our company across the globe, we put our business on hold, and the red for Red Day stands for Renew, Energize, and Donate. So this is where we come together and we come up with a project that benefits our community. We've done things like Habitat for Humanity. We worked with the Family Connections last year, Apostle House in Newark. Then we had Feed the Need, which was benefited food banks in 3 counties that we work with. We raised $10,000 and donated 5,000 pounds of food. So, we really do make a difference, and it's It's a great way for you to reach out to your sphere and ask them to participate and help us help others. So we're just going to talk about this year's event.
So what we have decided to do this year is we're partnering with an organization called Jersey Cares, and Jersey Cares works with a multitude of other agencies that serve, people who are in transition or, I don't know, halfway houses, or,
Yeah, they help
kind of
in
thing.
all kinds of ways, and they have
um,
ongoing collections. And this one,
Yes, so
is what we're gonna
what
do.
we are going to do is collect items, purchase and collect items and assemble them into first night kits. Or when someone goes into transitional housing, then they have this kit that has all of their toiletries and whatever they need, for their first few days. And so this is an example of all the items that are needed. What we are going to do is we're going to set up an Amazon wish list, an Amazon registry. There's going to be one for each office, Westfield, Summit Short Hills, and Montclair. And we are going to give you all of these like social media graphics and blurbs that you can use on your social media to put it out to your sphere to collect these items. You can give them the Amazon store link. And, it should be pretty easy actually to collect all the items. And then what we're going to do is we're going to gather together in our offices, probably the night before for those of us who may have day jobs, but we'll gather the night before for those people, and also on the day of Red Day. And we're just going to get all those items and work to put them together into kits and bags and deliver them to Jersey Cares.
so one thing to notice, the slides that you see now are the social media graphics that we'll be providing you with. We will have a separate set of slides for Summit, Westfield, and Montclair, and each will have a separate link to Amazon. This way, people can order items and ship them to your local offices. And we're also going to have a little competition. Our goal is to create 250 kits per office. And the office that assembles the most number of kits will get 15 points towards the Keller Cup. The next in line will be 10 points. And then the third most helpful office will not, the last, will get 5 points. So a little spirit of competition, but as always, a way to gather. Our committee, our culture committee, we always use more hands, but please get involved. But look out for this stuff. We're also going to give you the verbiage that you can cut and paste. We're giving you hashtags, everything you need to just cut, paste, and
Yep,
Put
and
it
Red
out
Day
there.
is less than a month away. So as soon as you see it, get at it. Let's start collecting the
save
items.
the date, May
Yep.
11th. All right,
Thanks.
thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. I think you guys planned a really, really great opportunity this year. So many of you have been taking advantage of these home-based events, which, as a reminder, for those of you that are newer and don't know what they are, we've put together client appreciation events for you. It once a month in each of the different market centers. So we're right here in Summit this week, Wednesday, April 19th. You can invite your clients, make it really nice. There's going to be some snacks and beverages, and we're having somebody come and talk about getting organized. So we know that's a really hot topic the last few years with people. And so we are excited for you to invite your clients.
Red Day, where there are all graphics already. There's all hashtags, there's verbiage. So if anyone has any questions, it's all out there for you to see so that.
Okay, so what you guys may not be able to hear is for you to invite your clients, we've made it very easy. All the graphics are out there. You can post it on your social media. You can email it out to your sphere. So it's going to be very, very, very client appreciation in a box for you. So get some clients here. Don't forget, call people and invite them. That's a great time to have a conversation with them and say things like, hey, I'm sure you've heard how red hot the market is for sellers right now. I'm just curious, is there any price at which you guys would consider selling your home? So this is the thing that can help you make those calls to your clients so you don't have to feel like an idiot simply saying, who do you know that wants to buy and sell a house? You have a reason to call them now and make an offer. So work that, guys. All right, we're getting great at
for flyers that you can send out and having our guest, and he actually gets houses ready to sell. So it may be information that you're gonna want to advise your clients.
Okay.
as well.
Janet, can you put that, oh, Kara, somebody already put it in. Okay, great. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so let's take advantage of that, guys. We've had great feedback the last few weeks. We're going old school. We're doing broker caravans again. So this is for agents that are newer and want to hang out with some seasoned people. It's for some seasoned people that feel tired of being isolated, which is what real estate can feel like sometimes, and some leadership and ALC. So come, join in, go to open houses with other people. We're meeting here at 10:45 and in Westfield at 10:45. We're doing both this week. And so just take advantage of that. It's fun to go and do it with other people and get some good food and, you know, whatever. We make sure you go where the food is. Okay. Yeah, so the good thing that you guys need to know, if everybody's invited, but it's happening in Westfield, there's conversation practice right before that. I believe it starts at 9:45. In the old days, we called that script practice, but we don't say that anymore. So it's conversation practice. I sat in on one of them a couple of weeks ago. Whew, it was really, really good, seriously. So unless you already perfected your skills, you might want to think about going there. I'm sure you not only will learn a lot, you'll have some things to offer as well. This is very exciting. I'm going to it on the 21st. This guy, Jeff Glover, many of you may have seen him in the past. He's a great trainer, really, really, really good trainer. So put that in your calendar and get to buy a ticket. I think there's an Eventbrite down there. The link's been sent out probably about 6 times. Here's the other thing. If you guys, it's very non-Keller Williamsy that, you know, people like to say brand agnostic. This is a great event for you to invite a friend or a co-bro to. You don't have to say anything about him trying to recruit you. You don't have to say anything. You can just say, hey, there's a really great training. I happen to have a free ticket. I'd like to take you. If you guys get a free ticket, the office will pay for their ticket. So it's a way for you to start warming up some relationships without having to be too salesy. So either go by yourself or better yet, go with a co-broke. Also, this is a month later. This guy is talking about wealth building. I've never heard him before, but I have heard really, really rave reviews from other people within the company. So unless you already have enough money, this is another thing you should consider. You really want to take advantage of all the wealth building things that are going on in KW at the moment. I know I can speak from personal experience. Being in and around the wealth building things at KW has absolutely changed my world astronomically. So get involved in this stuff. I don't know anybody who's not interested in wealth. Even if you're not into money, we all know money is good for the good it can do. So make sure you have enough coming into your world. Okay. So many people went to family reunion, which was great. And I heard that a lot of people who didn't had FOMO. So you won't want to have the same FOMO in August. You're going to want to go to Mega Camp. I happen to really like it. I think Austin is fun. It's much smaller than family reunions. There's a little bit less running around and even more relationship building time. Great stuff to learn. You want to sign up now. I don't know exactly when the early bird special runs out, but it still is early bird. So yeah. So what Howard's talking about is if you go and bring a guest who does at least $5 million in production, and there's no way for you guys really to know that. You're going to have to check with us. So don't invite anybody without checking with us. We will pay their way, including their flights and hotel. If you bring 2 people that do at least 5 million in production, we'll pay their way and yours. There is about a 90% conversion ratio when people go to family reunion and Mega Camp. It's about a 90% conversion ratio that they will actually join. So that should tell you 2 things. One, if you're not going, you should say to yourself, gosh, that must be a really powerful learning experience if it converts that many people. And second of all, why wouldn't you want to take advantage of that to grow your downline? Thanks for reminding me, Howard. Okay, a lot of things on the calendar of events. I won't read them all, but make sure you guys, the slide is going out to everybody. Make sure you guys stay in the habit of looking at the daily dose every day. I mean, so the social media stuff on the 25th is going to be especially great. You know, back to talking about building that $100,000 pipeline and just having 201 contacts at command. So ton of stuff. So make sure you guys get all that in your calendar. This is a new thing that we're really excited about, but once a quarter, KW Confetti, we're going to be celebrating all the new people that have joined our KW family, as well as people that have capped that quarter. But everyone's invited. Our ALC is helping us sponsor this. Guaranteed Rate is helping us sponsor this. So this month it is April 20th right here. So you guys will want to come and hang out and talk shop with each other. Okay, so we had a meeting with all 3 of our ALCs this week, and something came up that I think we should just all be mindful of. And that is, there are some companies out there who really push their agents to do exclusives. This is a free market. They can do what they want. You guys are, you know, we try not to over dictate what you guys can do, but I want everybody to remember a couple of things about our culture. And that is, we have abundant mindsets. We believe there's enough business to go around. We also believe, most of us, that you're absolutely going to represent your seller to the best possible degree if you expose their listing to as many people as possible. It seems so basic to me, but I know that's a lot of not what's going on out there. And what I'm starting to hear is that even internally, it hasn't really been this way within our market center, that it's just so tough out there that people are keeping things a little closer to the vest, not listing them. So I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir to a degree, but I'd really like everybody to keep that mindset that that's what we want. That's really the kind of culture we want to have here, where we're giving everybody and their clients an equal opportunity while taking really good care of our sellers. So I think that's enough said about that. I'm going to turn it over to Howard.
Yeah, actually, I even add on that last topic, that it really ought to be part of your, I don't know why we don't say script anymore. We say conversations now for some reason, but whether it's a script or a conversation, I do think that making the point to sellers that exposing your house is going to get you the most money. And we recently did sort of a test because it happens that the most extreme cases of this pocket listing phenomenon occurs over in Westfield. And it's the agents over there run into it a lot. And I really think that it's very basic, simple thing to see that if a house is exposed to the broader marketplace, you're going to do better. Our job is really a very simple one. We maximize the exposure a house gets, make it look the best we can to take advantage of that exposure. But we tested it out over in Westfield, and in fact, the company that is going around saying they're going to do exclusive listings, it turns out that in Westfield itself, 67% of the listings that sell in Westfield are sold by companies other than that one that's saying they're going to keep your listing a pocket listing. So they're really doing real serious harm by advancing that idea as a good idea for home sellers. It just isn't. To cut off 67% of the exposure is not doing anybody any service. And you will score points with sellers if you point this out and explain it to them in a way that they can see. You can save, maybe they'll offer some kind of a commission concession, but those are pennies. You're losing dollars to save pennies. It's as simple as that. So anyway, let's just take a look and see what's going on in the world, you guys. And first thing I just want to show you, I want to just sort of talk about what's going on in the world and then see how it's affecting our market locally. So this is a chart showing the GDP, and it's actually this chart is a liar because right above those bars it says something that is not true. Those bars represent not change from the previous quarter, but actual GDP levels in each quarter. So If you just look at those bars for a second, you can see what's happened there during the COVID in and out. We had extreme ups and downs in GDP. So it makes this whole graph sort of difficult to read. In fact, if you look at the last 2 quarters, the third and fourth quarter in 2022 are on the rightmost side of the screen as you look at it. The bars look pretty much the same. I can tell you that those 2 bars, third quarter of 22, we actually experienced 3.2% growth domestically. And then the fourth quarter was 2.6% growth. So we had a little drop off. The 2 quarters in the beginning of the year were negative, which technically in all of history has always been a recession, but I guess we had to redefine. We're redefining everything now. So we don't want to say recession. So we changed the definition of recession, but that recession, which wasn't a recession, was what took up the first 2 quarters of 22. And then we did have positive growth in the third and fourth quarter, 3.2, as I say, and 2.6% growth. Why is that important? Well, it matters, and it matters to us especially because this kind of scenario, this backdrop is what calls the tune as Chairman Powell and the Fed are deciding how to go about fighting inflation. If we were in the depths of a severe recession with quarter after quarter of negative growth, their fight against inflation would be different. And I said in the beginning of the inflationary period that we're currently in, that it will be interesting to learn what the chairman's stomach is for this fight against inflation, to see what his commitment really is to it. And it's become increasingly clear that, well, I guess he's as wimpy as I sort of was worried he is. He's going to be raising the Fed funds rate one more time, apparently, according to the smart people on Wall Street. And that'll put it at 5.25. If we look at the next slide, we'll see where we've been and where we are. So this is the Fed funds rate. This is the overnight lending rate, which is the only rate that the Fed can control. They have no control over any other rate. Every other rate that's out there beyond one night, one day, is a market controlled rate. This is what the Fed controls, and this is how the Fed tries to steer the economy and provide, which is their charter, to provide steady pricing, which they define as 2% inflation. So you can see the pink shaded areas are officially real recessions that we've been in over the years. You can see that at 07 and 08, we clearly were in a sustained period recession. And you can see what the Fed was doing then. They were dropping the overnight interest rate for the Fed funds rate aggressively, hoping that would, and it did, affect longer term rates and eventually get us out of that recessionary period. Then what happened is they left the rate too low too long, and it seems to be a popular mistake for the Fed to make because it makes you very popular politically, and you can get invited to more cocktail parties in Washington if you leave the rate lower for a sustained period of time. So that's a tempting thing apparently to do. Now what we've been doing is, so we've come up from a 0.25% Fed funds rate up to, we're currently at 5% is the Fed's target. I'm sorry, I stepped out of the picture there, but and nobody can hear me when I do that too. So apparently what we're going to get is one more rate rise to 5.25%. And again, why do we care? Because the overnight rate is having effect on longer term rates. If I stood here and I told you that the Fed funds rate was going to be 5.25% for the next 30 years, period, all day long, end of story, the 30-year rate, which is now at about, I think 4% or 3.80 or something like that, would rise to that level because longer term interest rates, as opposed to overnight interest rates, they're trying to guess the future. And so if you knew what the future was and it was different than what is supposed right now, then rates would rise to that level. So the reason that longer term rates are lower than the overnight rate, they're all lower. The 2-year note, then the more important 10-year note that we look at to sort of gauge where mortgage rates are going, are all well below 5.25%. So that's telling you that the marketplace is expecting, for one thing, a recession. and for another thing, the Fed to react to that recession by lowering interest rates eventually. So that is why the longer term interest rates are lower than our overnight lending rate. So what I expect to happen is if these guys are right on Wall Street, it does make sense. The logic I do follow. They're going to go to 5.25%. They're probably going to leave it there for a very long time while they see what happens with inflation. And in fact, on Wednesday, I was going to say yesterday, but of course that was not yesterday. So Wednesday, which is 2 days ago now, getting my bearings, coffee is kicking in. We had a inflation release. CPI came out slightly better than expected, indicating an annual inflation rate of about 5%. Initially, the market took off on that news, thinking that it was better than expected, but then realizing that we're nowhere near the 2% that the Fed's going to need to actually change its disposition on how it handles its business. The market had sold off at the end of the day that day, because this is by no means a settled matter. So we're going to be spending a long-term time, and I'm glad the mortgage guys have left because I can speak freely now and they won't punch my face in. But I think the current rates that we see right now for 30-year loans, especially, which is about 6 3/8, 6.5. I just feel like we're gonna be seeing low 6% mortgage rates for a very, very long time until this inflation reality works itself out one way or the other. So just settle in for a long period of stagnation. And really, the takeaway for you guys should be that your clients should be able to live their lives and not worry about, waiting for a rate that's never going to come. It's a reality, and their plans need to move forward, and their lives need to be lived regardless. This is just the reality. It was nice that we had 3% mortgages for a while. We just don't anymore. And waiting for that to happen again is sort of a fool's errand. And they need to focus on more important things and things that they can control. So, is that Shannon moving me along? She's advancing my slides for me. Well, I am a little low. Okay, so here's a look at our marketplace real quick, you guys. Now these green bars are median prices. So we saw a very interesting thing last month in March where the median price actually increased. The numbers at the top of these bars are just the numbers of units that closed in those months. They have no meaning as far as the heights of these bars in each month. We saw an almost year-long lowering trend in median prices in the MLS, and then that jump up last month, which was not. You can see there's really percentage-wise not another month where we had a change that was so as severe as that in 1 month's time, and we're going to see why that happened in a minute. But we had a big jump up from $455,000 median price in February to March of $480,000. So that was a big jump up. That top bar there in July of 22 that we got as high as $518,000 median price. In the people always say, is this just local area? This is the entire MLS that we're looking at. Okay, next slide. And so here we look at this slide a lot. We can see every single month, and the red is inventory, blue is under contract, and green is closings. You can see what stands out most, obviously, each time we look at this, are the red bars, the inventory, showing very cyclical behavior. And once again, we are beginning to see that bear out. The spring season has just begun, obviously, and we can expect to see a similar pattern develop there. Just for your information, and again, the inventory is the big topic, and the inventory is the reason why we saw that bump up in median prices. Last month, you can see that red bar, the low point there in February of 23, that was 8,500 units in inventory. That was the low point on this chart. The high point on that chart, by the way, all the way over in July of 21, was just under 16,000. So it's 15,790. So we've come about halfway down in terms of the amount of inventory that we're working with. So quite a big drop. Let's look further now on the next slide at the blue and green bars. So these are obviously the green bars here. These are units that were sold. So you see the same numbers that we saw above the median price bars there. This is the actual representation of how many units went to the closing table. And you can see we did actually get a nice jump up in last month in March from February, which was a dismal below 2,000 number. And we had 2,196 units close in the MLS last month in March. And there is an optimistic tale here. The next slide, we can see that under contracts are actually beginning to jump up nicely. We've come up in the last 3 months, putting more under contract. Obviously, this means that we can expect to see that show up in sales. And finally, yes, I'm on my last slide, Shannon. We can see exactly where this price pressure is being brought to bear. For the first time ever, we were at 1.7 months of inventory. Those bars are months of inventory, months supply of inventory. You can see the dotted line representing the days on market. That last one floating there above the bar it's 38 days on market. It came down just 2 months prior, it was 55 days on market. So we've had a big drop. This inventory shortage is continuing and real, and we're all feeling it. Here we go. Back to the main performance. And by the way, you guys, I just want everybody to applaud for Shannon. She does an amazing job each week. She's preparing for this. Takes it very seriously, and it's very important to her to be delivering value to you guys. And so we appreciate it. She goes and gets her hair done each time too, and look how beautiful she looks.
Thank you. Yes, had a blowout yesterday. Okay, you guys know that when you're out there selling real estate, your team is really important, and that includes your inspectors and your mortgage people, and of course the attorneys. And so Evan Dragman's going to talk to us today. And one thing I always found when I was selling that I really liked about working with Evan is he's really a realtor's attorney. He very much treats this like a team, and so I asked him to come and give you guys some advice today on how to make your client's offer stand out while still protecting them.
Hi, everyone. So as Shannon mentioned, I'm a local real estate attorney. I know there's a couple familiar faces here. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm based in Maplewood, but kind of working throughout New Jersey nowadays, especially with everything being virtual. So what I'm really going to talk about today a little bit is, you know, as Howard was just talking about, inventory being really low, all these properties are getting multiple bids. Really how to make your offer stand out. You know, when you're submitting an offer on behalf of a buyer, when you're evaluating offers from seller, you're getting a whole bunch in. How to really distinguish those offers. The first, I don't really, no one needs me here. The most obvious is money. If you can get your client bidding more, that's going to make that offer stronger. No matter what legal tricks or sales tricks anyone does, that is going to help carry the day most of the time. However, a lot of these houses have multiple bids and the money is often really close. So it's in those situations when the money really is close, how do you make a difference? So going to go through a little bit first on, you know, how we all protect ourselves in this process. One of the most common limitations I see when people submit offers is limiting inspections to major structural, mechanical, environmental, and safety. Almost every offer has that. And it's important because if you don't have it, a lot of sellers are going to dismiss it. But when you're telling your client you should include it, and when you're looking at it as a seller, it's really important to know what it means. So we're going to break it down a little into two sections. First part is major. What does really major mean? Nothing. That's the easy answer. It's generally speaking, if you just put in the contract limited to major problems, that doesn't really mean a whole lot because major means different things to different people. And unless you're going to define that in some way, you're not really saying anything. I know me personally, I think a GFI outlet is not major by any significance, but you'd say a first-time home buyer who just was told by their inspector that a GFI outlet could lead to a fire, that's major to them. So it doesn't really matter what, you know, major is just a kind of a phantom word. However, you can strengthen that. And there's ways to define it. And again, goes back to money. There's generally two ways of defining it. Major can be defects, your client will accept will accept anything that's less than $1,000, any individual item less than $1,000. Or you can say in the aggregate, we'll accept all issues less than $10,000. It's really important to talk to your client. That's kind of where major can help you. So when you include that language, you can say in this contract, inspections limited to major issues, and major means any individual item less than $1,000. That's telling the seller that, hey, we're putting some meat behind our nonsense words. Saying to a seller, this is a real limitation, not just a limitation to match everyone else's offer, is going to help that stand out. And again, you guys, as a lawyer here, I can say you don't have to perfectly write every clause in that contract. Your job is getting your contract accepted. So phrase it in a comfortable way that your client is comfortable and that just accurately conveys what you're trying to do. Don't worry about it comporting to every possible thing. That's what attorney review is for. It'll come to us, when you have an attorney on your team who knows what they're doing. They're not going to withdraw that limitation, but they're going to help explain it to the client also, and then just make sure it conveys what the goal is. So it's really important. Now, the second section of that major structural, mechanical, environmental safety are those 4 categories. And those 4 categories do sometimes matter. And, if we break them down separately, safety is one of them. Again, that's not a limitation. Safety doesn't mean anything. When you say it's limited to safety issues, that's everything. That can be a sidewalk that has lifted up by 3/4 of an inch. That's a safety issue according to every inspector. So when you're saying, well, it's limited to major safety issues, again, that doesn't really mean anything. That's already what the contract basically says. The other, then we have the word mechanical. Mechanical, again, it's kind of a catch-all. It means everything. It's unquestionable. Mechanical means plumbing, electric, septic, those HVAC, those systems of the house. But it probably also means the roof and the windows. Those are mechanical systems of how the house operates, keeping the weather out. So mechanical is, again, this catch-all that doesn't really limit the inspection, even though we all put it in there as a way of limiting. Then we have the other 2, structural and environmental. Those are the 2 that are kind of the most important, and almost no end user buyer waives. Some investor buyers will waive that stuff, but those are almost always included. Structural, you're going to want to include. It's pretty self-explanatory what that means, but there's also a lot of room for interpretation. A lot of people will say a roof is a structural component of a house. What does that mean? If the roof is leaking, it's a structural issue. It's really hard to say. And the reality is that a buyer trying to get out of a contract is going to win that argument almost every single time. And then environmental. Environmental, again, can run a gamut of what it includes. Almost always, people don't really waive oil tank sweeps. That's always included. But environmental can certainly include asbestos. Then it can include mold. Now, mold is one of those things that can be really, really minor when you have a little bit of mildew underneath of a sink. And it can be major when you have a basement that's covered in mold and you walk down there and it's egregious. So, these are kind of these limitations that don't really matter. Now, the reason I'm talking about that is because you want to make your offer stand out. So you might have a client who says, look, I'm not, if it's structurally fine, I'm good. Let's not worry about the rest. And then you can say, okay, it's limited to structural issues, but what you should do is also highlight what you're not including, because I see contracts all the time that will say, well, we're limited to major structural mechanical issues. And when I see that, I know, what, someone just forgot to write environmental and safety. And I look at that and that's how I interpret it, as if it's there. So when you have a client who really is saying, well, look, it's just structural. It's one thing to write limited to structural only, but you can also say we are waiving safety issues that are not structural. We're waiving environmental issues. It's important to highlight what you're not including just as much as it's important to highlight what you are including. Because again, your goal is to convey what is your offer in an accurate way. So when you're accurately dropping something, highlight what you're dropping. It's a really important segment of that. And again, keeping those money, keeping the money idea in your head, maybe it's, look, we'll waive all structural issues unless it's going to cost more than $25,000. when you have a really aggressive buyer. So, again, putting that in there in any way that can really, that a seller can really grasp onto and say, hey, this actually means something more than just these amorphous words. The final thing is really advising your client when you're on the buy side, telling your client, what do these items mean? We're going to include this language. You have a first-time home buyer who says, oh, we want to do inspection. It's really important. And then you write in there, because it's entirely typical, limited to major structural, mechanical, environmental safety. And you have a client who freaks out. Explain to them, this doesn't really mean anything. This is standard process, but major is a very subjective word and it can be anything. And these categories cover all defects. Inspections are never for cosmetic issues. They're never for upgrade issues. None of this changes that. So it's really important just to advise your client, what do all these words that you're throwing in there mean? How does it help them? And how does it not really hurt them? So that's really important. Now, this related to that is a waiver of certain elements, accepting certain elements of the house as is. Very commonly and more often, we are getting a seller who discloses issues and say, look, the fireplace, we don't know the condition, accept it as is. That's one of our conditions. Windows on the second floor, they're old, those are as is. Tell your client that. Tell them that's what it means, because I have had many clients who say, oh yeah, we accept that as is, but subject to the inspection. Well, that's not as is. And it's a really confusing thing for someone saying, well, talking about as is for a moment. Almost every one of our contracts that we all work on are technically as is contracts, because really what that means is that the seller is not obligated to do anything. The seller is selling their house as is. However, it doesn't always mean the buyer is accepting the house as is. So these are all technically as is. Now, we're going to exclude new construction from this contract because clearly those are not as is contracts. The seller has to build a house. But in most contracts, that's a resale. Those are as is sales. The seller is not obligated to do anything. They're just subject to the inspection. However, when a seller is selling a specific component, and it's very often fireplaces, flues, sometimes detached garages or windows, buyers are accepting those items as is, not subject to inspection. Now, I always tell clients, look, you're free to inspect it, but if you find a problem, be aware of it, and that's all you get. There is no right to cancel a contract as a result of that. And it's really important to have that conversation with your client, because it's a bad feeling for everyone to get your offer accepted, and then all of a sudden it falls apart during attorney review because a buyer says, well, I didn't really understand I was accepting this no matter the condition. And that's where it really is important that a buyer accepting as is very different than a seller selling as is. It's also really important when you're including those as is, explaining to your client and making sure everyone's on the same page as to what exactly is being sold as is. In certain elements, it's obvious. When you have a detached garage and it's being sold as is, it's done. However, where I've seen a lot of problems recently are fireplaces, flues, and chimneys, because those are related issues, but not the same issues. So a seller might say, well, we're selling our chimney as is. Well, does that mean that the fireplace, clearly a part of the chimney, is being also sold as is? Because sometimes there are structural issues in a fireplace, or safety or fire issues that are not really part of the chimney, but are separate. And if it's the chimney, does that include the flue inside, or are we really just talking about the exterior structure of the chimney? So obviously every seller wants to include as much of it as they can. Every buyer wants to do the opposite. So having a conversation with your client, and the further your buyers can go, the further they're going to stand out to the seller. Yeah, did you have a question? Yep.
Yeah, we're including major mechanical, and that flue is part of your.
So that question is whether or not a flue being sold as is part of the HVAC system as part of a mechanical element of the house. And the answer is, it depends on the contract and how the contract is written. And that's why it's so important to have that conversation with your client ahead of time so they know what they're getting into. And my answer, quite honestly, is very different depending on who I'm representing. When I represent a seller, that flu, doesn't matter what the flu is servicing. The flu is as is. Doesn't matter if it's servicing the hot water heater or the furnace or the fireplace. It's part of what we're selling as is, and that's it. As a buyer, I'm gonna sometimes try and play with that a little bit. But again, it kind of comes back to, as a buyer's attorney and a seller's attorney, I often will take my lead from what's in that contract that you guys put together. When I have questions, I'm gonna call you guys and say, hey, this is what's written here. What was the intention here? And have that conversation. Because sometimes that intention is, oh, no, there's a specific fireplace issue that was discussed and we're accepting that as is. Okay, great. Now I can finalize that in attorney review in that fashion. Sometimes it's, oh, we don't know. We're just accepting it all as is. And okay, my job now is to just tell the buyer, hey, in case you weren't aware, sometimes the flu services these units. Certain things like a flu in particular, it's not a Pandora's box. A flu can be fixed for a sum certain. And when a buyer hears that, it's much easier for them to quantify accepting that risk. It's much easier to accept a $7,000 risk than, I don't know. And that's for everyone. So it's really important to, the answer to your question is never really clear cut and is depending on the situation, but is why it's so important to have all of these conversations in advance so that everyone's on the same page. Now, as a purely neutral arbiter, my opinion is that a flu is a flu is a flu. It doesn't matter what it services. The connection, the appliance might be defective, and that's a mechanical issue. The connection might be defective, well, that can be easily fixed. But once the flu is in the chimney, that's what's being sold as. So again, yeah, going back, it's about those about the inspection issues. Now, the next section where I see a lot of problems and a lot of people trying to stand out, appraisal waivers relating to mortgage waivers. Mortgage waiver is easy. When you have a client who's willing or able to pay cash, you can waive your mortgage, and their obligation to purchase is not contingent upon them obtaining finance. When you do have a client who is getting financing, what I've been seeing a lot is some type of appraisal waiver. Some clients will waive the appraisal entirely. Some clients will waive an appraisal to a certain amount. Now, the transaction John was talking about recently, where a house appraised over $1 million lower, that client had a mortgage financing contingency, but had zero appraisal contingency. So essentially what they did is they said, we don't care what it appraises at. If we can qualify for our mortgage credit-wise, we will accept it. Turns out it appraised so low, that person didn't have the cash to finish that transaction because it appraised so low. So they were really had a problem. So it's so important to speak to your client and really understand what that appraisal contingency means. And it means that if they're buying a house, and I'm just using round numbers, they're buying a house for $1 million, they're borrowing a typical 80%, they're going to be able to borrow $800,000. If that same house appraises for 900, they're not going to be able to borrow 80%. They're only going to be able to borrow 80% of 900, about 720, I think. They're going to have to come up with an extra $80,000 in liquid funds for closing. It doesn't have to be much more complicated than that. And when I have clients who do this, it's really just showing them what those numbers look like. Making sure they understand that. I see a lot of waivers that say, well, as long as it appraises to the list price, that's acceptable. Great. Run through those numbers. Here's 80% of the list price. Are you willing to accept a mortgage of this amount? You are great. Let's waive the appraisal up to 80%. When you have a client who is already borrowing less than 80%, you can build in an appraisal waiver without hurting your client at all, because they're already at that lower threshold. If you have a client, again, buying $1 million house who's only planning to borrow $700,000, you can affirmatively say, we waive the appraisal down to 900, and your client's rights haven't been changed even. But now, instead of just having a mortgage of 70%, some seller who's evaluating all these offers says, oh, look, this person's actually willing to waive the appraisal. Doesn't actually change anything for your client, but it looks better to a seller and it helps your offer stand out when they're evaluating all these offers within $5,000 of each other. So understanding how these numbers all work together, making sure your client has the ability to move it forward, or is sometimes just without the ability, willing to take that risk. Those are the conversations that are really important to have. And the earlier you get someone like John on board, the better, because that your client will have that much higher of a comfort level in waiving certain things. A next big section that I see a lot of people trying to make their offer stand out that is rife with problems are use and occupancy agreements. Now, there's two parts about use and occupancies that I really want to mention. Number one, including in a contract, buyer willing to do use and occupancy. While it might be a great selling point, it will slow down the process every single time, because it is the same thing as saying buyer willing to buy the house. You would never submit an offer without a number. You would never submit it without some kind of parameters. Having some loose, no one is going to expect any real estate agent to put together a use and occupancy agreement. But there's a handful of key terms that are part of coming to an agreement. You know, is your buyer willing to let them stay in the house for a year or for a week? That makes a huge difference. And it makes a huge difference to both sides. Are they willing to absorb the cost, or are they expecting their costs covered? Are they willing to take less than their cost? Because the buyer's costs are usually going to be lower than the seller's costs. So the seller will oftentimes not want to pay the buyer's new cost of ownership and want to keep paying. So having an idea of where, what some of those parameters will be will help attorney review move quicker, versus when I get a contract in that just says, use and occupancy available. Well, now I have to have the conversation. What do you mean by available? How long is it available for? What are you expecting? And we have to go back to the other side. Yep. So my personal advice is that I don't like use and occupancy, period. There is no, they're problematic for a whole host of reasons, but there's a certain line, and that line is undefined, where it doesn't matter if we call it a use and occupancy, it's a lease. If you have a use and occupancy and it's for a year and there's a problem, you're going to go into court and the judge is going to look at you and say, I don't care that you called it a use and occupancy. This is a lease between two people, period. So, when you're talking about a week, that is a valid use and occupancy. It's related to the transaction for a very limited period of time. Under 30 days, you're going to be in that window comfortably. When you start going more than 30 days, you're running a little bit into that risk. And I would say more than 60 days is almost certainly that risk. But it really does depend on the situation, and keep in mind, almost every mortgage that our clients are obtaining are primary residence mortgages. Almost every client is signing a document at the closing that says they intend to occupy the property within 60 days of closing. If they have a use and occupancy for 90 days, as a pure technicality, that's mortgage fraud. They're telling the bank, we're going to occupy it in 60 days, and signing an agreement not to occupy it for 90 days. There's an element of mortgage fraud. There's also an issue of insurance. You're obtaining insurance for a primary residence and not living there and renting it out. And when it's a couple of days, it's very similar to if you let your sibling stay in your house, you're still going to be covered. But when it starts to be 30, 45, 60 days, you're going to you may run into problems where there's an insurance claim to be made and your insurance company says, no, you don't have coverage. You broke rule 1 of a owner occupied insurance policy and rented it. So, but your buyer also can't get landlord insurance because the mortgage company will not approve it as an owner occupied mortgage. So that's why these use and occupancies can be really legally problematic when they extend more than 30 days. Less than 30 days, you're kind of all within that comfort level that's specifically related to the transaction, but there's still problems. And another big problem about use and occupancies and advising your clients, especially your sellers, because sellers have to understand this more than buyers really. The intention of a use and occupancy is in a way, shifting the closing date. Now, the closing will still happen, but the obligations are intended to be the same at the closing as at the vacation, at the end of the use and occupancy. What that means is, just like if we're a week before closing and the air conditioning system just breaks, no one questions, that's the seller's responsibility. And if you're renting a home, normal lease, a 1-year rental, and you've been there for 3 months and the air conditioning just breaks because it's old, that's clearly the landlord's responsibility. In a use and occupancy, it's it's the owner's responsibility, the person who's living there, the seller that no longer owns the house. No seller likes that. Sellers live, especially we're getting into hot weather, it's July. They have a 3-week use and occupancy. 10 days in, the air conditioning system breaks. The seller is going to say, I don't own this house anymore. I don't really care. I'll just leave. The buyer turns around and says, whoa, 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 you have to deliver the property to me in accordance with the contract, so now there's going to be a fight. And, I shouldn't say that. Many sellers will do the right thing. Some do not. And there will be a fight. And, there's a security deposit held. And the seller will be calling me every day. Where's my money? Where's my money? Where's my money? And the buyer will be calling every day. We can't take this house. It's 100 degrees out and there's no working air conditioning. So having and I just had this transaction recently where a seller said, oh, great, we're going to do a use and occupancy. We're going to close June 1st. We're going to move out June 25th. It's great, no problem. I got the contract. I explained to my client, the seller, what that meant, what that looks like. She is a commercial real estate attorney. Immediately said, no, I'm not agreeing to that. There's no way. Well, it turned out everyone was happy with a July 1st closing date. No use and occupancy. The buyer was a cash buyer. We didn't have to worry about mortgage stuff. She, had it in her idea that it was just automatically better to close earlier, but she hated this idea of this risk. And because of family issues, she couldn't move out earlier. So we floated with the other side. Hey, what about no use and occupancy in a July 1st closing? Great, everyone's happy. So sometimes these use and occupancies just overcomplicate situations. They overcomplicate and add risk to a situation where, hey, we can just close a week, 10 days later. Sometimes use and occupancies are needed. So it's not a blanket no. Sometimes they're needed. And in those situations, just making sure that when you submit your offer, you get those parameters of the use and occupancy in is going to be vital. Now, a couple other ways to really have your offers stand out. Again, money, higher offer, but also having your buyer submit their deposit in advance of the offer. I've had clients who call me in advance and they're ready to submit an offer and they say, hey, Evan, can I wire you $50,000 in advance? I then provide an escrow letter that goes along with the offer. Hey, I represent so-and-so. They have already tendered a deposit of $50,000. Here's their offer. It makes their offer just that much more real. Hey, there's already money being held for this transaction. And that can, when you have an attorney who you're working with who has, an escrow account, which every attorney does, it's a really easy method to make that offer, especially when you have a client who's submitting, offers every week until they get their house. Getting that money in, it just makes it look better. It doesn't really change anything. It doesn't really do anything, but a seller likes to say, oh, that person already has the money in. Similarly, and this is always a bigger ask of an attorney, preparing an attorney review letter with the offer. That can make a big difference, especially when you're starting to get into some of these complicated, more complicated limitations on inspection or use and occupancy or appraisal waivers. Showing a seller that, hey, here's our offer, here's the limitations, and here's the review letter where we're not going to start walking back these issues. Because I get it all the time where a client will say, hey, I accepted this offer, everything's as is. And then the attorney for the buyer gets involved and all of a sudden not everything is as is. And there's this carve out and that carve out. But when a seller can say, okay, hey, here is the attorney review letter, they're really standing by what their offer is, that can absolutely help. Now, I wouldn't suggest you do it on every single offer everyone does, because A lot of attorneys are gonna be annoyed after a while, but when it's a worthwhile situation and you know, you have a lot of terms where that can help, that can be a really key element. So I think that's my signal. I hit all the big points. The last one I will mention, which is a short one, is speed. You know, limiting, you know, whether it's mortgage, whether it's an inspection and deposits. The faster you do that stuff, the better. And that's why, again, it's important to have your client educated. Speaking to John, hey, because this happens all the time also. We'll get our mortgage commitment in 14 days. And then we're in attorney review. Oh, I spoke to my mortgage guy. It's going to take 35. That's not good either. So having your client speak to the mortgage person, having your client, hey, we have an inspector, you know, inspector can be out there by Friday and we're submitting our offer on Tuesday. Being aware of that stuff and not just taking a flyer is really important. So, you know, the more you can solidify, the more you can educate a client, and the more that you can really convey what the intention of your offer is, the better. Thank you. I'm gonna stick around if anyone has any questions.
You guys, thanks out there in Zoom land, and come join us in person next time because we have fun here. Bye.